As part of the broadcast team for the Barrett Jackson collector car auctions, I spend an awful lot of time perusing the cars that are going to be crossing the block. Now, not only do I do that on site when we get to the auction, but also before we get there, I have to look and see what's coming up. And they've already released some of the cars that they say are going to be there in January. So let's take a moment and look at the top 10 cars that I'm looking forward to crossing the block at the January Barrett Jackson collector car auction in 2025. Well, let's start with a Batmobile. In this case, it's a replica of the 2005 Batman Tumbler. Now, you might remember the movie Batman Begins. It came out in 2005. Christian Bale was Batman. It tells the story of how Bruce Wayne became Batman. Now, in the movie, Batman uses a prototype vehicle known as the Tumbler. Not only can it plow through just about anything, but it can jump a pretty good distance as well. Now, I think there were 6 vehicles that were actually made for the movie, although only 4 were actually used in the movie. This is not one of those. This is a reproduction. It uses a 2005 Chevy C1500 as the foundation. It's got a Toyota engine, matte black finish, plenty of bat symbol accents, and 44-inch huge Super Swapper rear tires. Now, I'm not sure when this was actually built, but the consignor does say in the past year, this Tumbler underwent a meticulous 600-hour restoration. So it's up for sale. By the way, I read that Warner Brothers is selling 10 special edition recreations of the Tumbler. Price tag for those? $2.99 million apiece. I think this one will be just a tad less expensive than that. Number 9 is a 1968 VW bus. Okay, this one is purely a personal pick. It's because I used to have a 68 VW bus. I drove it from Los Angeles to Montreal for the Olympics back in 1976. And while I did a lot to that bus, it is nothing compared to how this 68 has been modified. They started with a bus that had spent its entire life in Phoenix, so it was rust-free. It had a complete nut and bolt restoration. They say they took the 1600cc engine and punched it out to 1776 cc's for a big boost in horsepower, and trust me, I drove those things. It was needed. 68 was a huge change for the bus. It went from that hippie-style split window up front to what we call the bread van, flatter front with a single big window. It was also 9 inches longer and quite a bit heavier than the previous generation. For number 8, let's go back to the 50s. How about a 1957 DeSoto Fireflight convertible? Now, 1957 DeSotos are really some of my favorite cars. This one is a Fireflight. It was just a step down from the Adventurer in 57, but to be honest with you, both look amazing. Unique for the DeSotos in 57 were those quad headlights up front. Most car makers didn't get that until 1958. This DeSoto Fireflight convertible got a frame-on restoration, powered by a 341 cubic inch Hemi V8, 4-barrel carb, 3-speed automatic transmission with dash-mounted push buttons. I love the two-tone look with a Fiesta red on top and a lower white accent spear, and just for more pizzazz, it's got a white convertible top. Now, fins were getting bigger in 57, and this Fireflight has massive fins that slide all the way to the back, giving the car a sweeping and fast look. Next up, how about a 1991 Nissan 300ZX Turbo? Now, this is one of my all-time favorite cars. Now, I'm sure you remember there were 2 different 300ZXs. This is the better one, the Z32 version, which came out in 1990, a massive leap forward in design. The consignor says this 1991 model is a one-owner car, and even better, it has less than 10,000 miles on the odometer. They say it's been kept in a garage every day since it left the dealership. 100% original. Okay, one minor change. They replaced the battery, but they still have the original battery, if you can imagine that. Not only is it an amazing design, but it's got that 3-liter turbo 6-cylinder engine that produced 300 horsepower, 5-speed manual transmission, and I even like the color, Aztec red with a black interior. Number 6 on this list, oh man, this is pretty amazing. A 2019 Aston Martin Vanquish Zagato shooting brake. Now, I am a sucker for station wagons, and I especially love when car builders make a shooting brake version of a really awesome car. That's exactly what happened here. Only 99 were built. This one is powered by a normally aspirated 5.9-liter V12 that makes 580 horsepower. It's got an 8-speed Touchtronic 3 automatic transmission. Aston Martin sent 300 Vanquishes to Zagato in Milan, Italy for special modifications, but less than a third got the estate wagon look. This is supposedly one of only 11 that were actually delivered to the United States. And it has plenty of expensive options, including a carbon fiber trunk deck that costs $19,000 by itself. They say the brand new, the MSRP on this thing was $877,000. Number 5 on my list is a 1970 Mustang Boss 302. Now, there are a couple of Boss 9s in the Scottsdale auction, but to be honest with you, I'm a big fan of the Boss 302. This is the car that was created specifically to help Ford win the Trans Am, and it did just that back in 1970 at the hands of Parnelli Jones and George Fulmer. Now, the 302 engine came out in '68, and it was the perfect solution for the Trans Am series because they had a limit of 305 cubic inches for their engines. This one has a 4-speed manual transmission, and the consignor says both the engine and the transmission are original to this car. Now, while the Trans Am racing version was a very modified version of this, sitting in this car, you can at least pretend like you're Parnelli Jones. Number 4 in my top 10, a 2014 Pagani Wira. Honestly, this thing is like seeing a unicorn in person. They only built 100 of these in 2014, and this will be the first time I've ever seen one in person. Pagani started building cars in the early 90s. Their first car was the Zonda. The Wira came along in 2011. It has a 6-liter, twin turbocharged V12 engine that's actually built by AMG, 730 horsepower, 0 to 60, 3.2 seconds. And the Wira's body is made from something called carbotanium, and while that sounds like it was made up, it's real. It's a blend of carbon fiber and titanium that is very light and strong. Now, when brand new, this car cost more than $1 million, and that was without any options. And by the way, if you're wondering where they got that name, it came from South America, the Quechua god of wind, Wairatata. While there are a lot of spectacular BMWs out there, I like this one for my top 10, a 1987 BMW M3. You know, this was the second year for the M3. It was based on the E33 series platform. Now, I believe this one at this auction is actually a Euro spec car because I don't think the M3 came to the United States until the 1988 model year. This generation of M3 was specifically developed so BMW could go racing. You know, to get it homologated, they actually had to build a certain number of the cars, and the great thing is that meant that you and I could buy a street-legal version of their 3 Series race car. This one has a 2.5-liter inline 4-cylinder engine, 192 horsepower, 5-speed manual, so it's perfect for track work. But to be honest with you, this one looks almost too nice to be going out on a track anywhere. Next up on the list, a 1969 Pontiac GTO Judge Ram Air 3. All right, here's a question. Which GTO is your favorite? For me, it's the 68 and 69 editions. I just love that style, which is why I like this 1969 GTO. It's a Judge with a Ram Air 3 engine. Now, 1969 was the first year for Judge. You know, it was inspired by that Rowan and Martin laugh-in TV show, the skit, Here Comes the Judge. While there weren't many cosmetic changes between 68 and 69, there was a pretty big change under the hood. This was the first year for the Ram Air 3, and it became standard with the Judge. It was offered as either a hardtop or convertible, but in the end, only 108 convertible units were sold, compared to more than 6,700 hardtops. By the way, we did see a rare 69 Judge convertible sell at Palm Beach back in 2023. And finally, my number 1 pick, the car that I am most looking forward to watching as it crosses the block in January, it's a 1956 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing Coupe. Now, to be honest, while the other cars could fall just about anywhere on my top 10 list, this is the only one that absolutely has to be number 1. Why? Well, because it's a Mercedes Gullwing. This isn't just one of the most beautiful cars ever designed. It was also one of the most significant automobiles ever built. Originally designed as a race car, it evolved into a magnificent car for the street. During the 4-year run from 54 to 57, they only made 1,200 Gullwings, and in 56, only 311 were made. The consignor says a huge amount of work has gone into this one, including rebuilding that original 3-liter inline-6 engine and the 4-speed transmission. Now, this color is actually the original factory combination of graphite gray with a light gray leather interior. They've even detailed the full ownership history, starting with a family in Pennsylvania that special ordered this back in 1956. In my mind, the Mercedes 300 SL Gullwing was the first real supercar, and it's the one I'm going to be drooling over all week at the 2025 Barrett Jacksons January auction in Scottsdale. So, what did you think of my top 10?